My Bible notes have a definite look to them. If you've been here for any amount of time, you know I have a go-to strategy or look. And this is something that came very naturally, but it's something I get a lot of questions about. And I wanted to break it down for you today in case you wanted to kind of adapt some parts of my style to Bible journaling, / also give you a couple tips and reasons on if you're adapting a strategy, building your Bible journaling look. This is why I think it works for me, and also what I would make sure to change or do differently. Let's begin.
Since the beginning of time, Faith Womack has always taken her Bible journaling notes like they were scrappy paper with torn edges and faux tape. She's always been a nerd, but today we will evaluate her antics.
Now, there's no perfect way to take Bible journaling notes. I think we're all on this journey of learning how to study the Bible better and more efficiently and taking notes. And I don't want to come off like somebody that has it perfectly figured out or like my style perfected, but I would say that my go-to way of writing in my Bible has always been this stylized version of worn paper, worn colorful paper that's layered with the faux tape. And I know that that's unique. I know that that's not something I got from somebody else. I honestly think it goes all the way back to these books I had as a child. They had like interactive elements in them, like an envelope, and you pulled out the letter and then you saw what the friend wrote the friend. It just made it look worn, like Jim Holtz styled paper. And I like that look. I want that worn, aged vibe. I've always leaned towards that. I don't know why. It's just fun. It doesn't look new and fresh. And so when it gets actually worn, it kind of just matches the look of it anyway, I guess. I don't know. I just like the look. So I will start drawing faux tape on the edges and weird, cool ways to make it like into a banner or fold the edge. And a lot of people ask me how I do that or why I do that. And I think there's a couple reasons why this note-taking method works really well. And then stay to the end and I'll show you how I do it, just a couple tricks. So first off, I think boxing off separate ideas, concepts, even separate sources, like this is a note on this verse from this commentary. This is a note on this verse from this commentary. Like doing that in separate boxes and separate little square group color-coded things. I think that's naturally how my brain works. I'm not sure if it works for everybody's brains that way, so I'm not trying to speak for everybody, but I think for me, this is a really great way for me to make an overarching big, especially theological concept boiled down and almost like contained into a little box. With it being color-coded with colorful arrows pointing to that particular colorful box, it's also easy for my eyes to see, oh, this box is circled in red. Let me follow the red arrow to the red note. It just naturally works really well for me. I know people immediately look at my Bible, especially my Psalm notes, and they're like, wow, this is actual insanity. This does actually look like a madhouse, a mad person's notes, right? Like I get that. But when you're in the moment reading word by word, you're able to see, okay, this one old Hebrew word is circled here because this is a word study on that word or whatever. When you're reading line by line, the arrows overlapping and leading to all these different notes is not quite as confusing as you would think it would be. But I also keep that in mind too. I try and make the arrows as followable as possible. And I plan ahead. I add a piece of paper in before I start taking my notes so that I can plan out and usually try and leave extra space for the future. So there's an aspect to which when you're Bible journaling, you always want to keep your future self in mind. Is my future self going to be able to find this note and what it goes to and what it belongs to and make it make sense? Is my future self going to still have room for future notes? Is my future self even be able to add paper for notes? Those are all things I'm constantly thinking of. So like, for example, this brown note right here, I made years ago. This was a note I did back in like 2022. But just this past week while I was studying this psalm, I was able to draw this note underneath it. Like it looks like it's layered underneath. And they look like they were done at the same time because they were done in the same way. And I think that's value to like creating a Bible journaling aesthetic or creating like a note-taking system, is because you just know you can make it match. Even like the tape, it looks a little bit different because back then I was doing tape with a black crayon and here I'm doing it with a silver colored pencil. But your eye just kind of connects it all because it's done basically the same way. And I think because of that, my style works because you can always add another square, another layer, underlaid, make it look like it's taped underneath that. You can always add more notes and make them look similar because it's a method that's done with very simple supplies. And that's my point number 2, this pattern of note taking isn't dependent on special highlighters, special anything. I can literally do this with a normal ballpoint pen and normal colored pencils or normal crayons that I just find somewhere. It's not something that needs the certain tools like my die cut machine or stamps or anything like that. I can do it anywhere with most any basic supplies. I also think this note-taking method works so well because you can write really small and it won't get mixed up with your other Bible journaling notes, even if there's a lot around them, because again, the color coding, because the squares, and because your eye can tell easier where your notes belong. But there's been other times where I've taken notes and I haven't drawn the square around them, or I haven't made clear, distinct markers and the notes all kind of blend together and get confusing. And so you can start using mixed media. You can throw in highlighters, you can throw in fancy stuff if you want to, or you can just keep it the same. And so over years, as I've changed my favorite highlighter brands, or I've changed my favorite crayons to use, or I've changed my favorite whatever, it still all looks cohesive over the years because it's still something that I can do no matter what with whatever I have. So let me show you how I do it, because it's kind of simple, but it's also not kind of simple. And I'm the type of person that like when I'm learning something, I want to see step by step, make sure I'm not missing anything. So let me walk you through. All right, so I have some paper here. I got my colored pencils and my crayons. So I just use the typical Crayola crayons and pencils. I like the thick twistable ones because they don't seem to break as much. But let's say this is my space for Bible notes here. I know it's not ever this big, but let's just roll with it. And let's say the Bible text is over here and I want to circle like one single word and draw an arrow over to where I think I'm gonna take Bible notes. First off, I basically never do that. I never draw an arrow first, just because I am constantly thinking about this space management. How can I give myself the most space to write the most notes in my Bible? Usually the arrow is the last thing I draw, but let's say it's one single word over here and I circle that word, and let's say it's loving kindness. In ESV, it's usually translated as loving kindness, and that's the Hebrew word hesed is the English transliteration, hesed. So let's say I want to take a note on a word over there and I circle it in my Bible. I'm going to go to the farmost corner. If it's a blank piece of paper, I'm going to try and go to a far off corner to give myself as much space to slowly work in towards the text. And I'm going to start writing my notes. Typically I'll draw like a single line just so I can write on a straight line. This word is hesed, blah, 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 and write my notes, quote my sources, whatever. And then I'll finish drawing the square around my notes. That's a big misunderstanding or like beginner mistake is people will draw the square and they'll take their notes and they'll run out of space. Never do that. If you can, first write your notes and then finish drawing the square. And like you saw me do over here, right here, I think it's really fun to give it not just a plain square look, but to fold over an edge or give it kind of like a ripped look. This is so much better. Okay, now you guys can see. So I like to do like a ripped look, and rips are never perfect, right? Like they're always kind of like longer on one side. Sometimes they go up real weird. Like I try and make it look as realistic as possible, as easy as possible. And then I always like to draw some faux tape. And then I have one colored pencil that in the last like 6 months, I've been like, okay, this is my tape colored pencil. And it's just the silver Crayola one. I like how it looks. Sometimes I'll throw some like wrinkles in the tape to make it look realistic. And I go really hard around the edges and then color soft in the middle. And I do the same thing with my note. So if you go dark around the edges like this, then it looks like there's shadowing and then the light is kind of hitting it to highlight the note. And it's just naturally a lot more appealing to the eyes. Human nature is then to read it because it's like, oh, the light is hitting it. When in all reality, you colored it that way to look like the light was highlighting it and hitting it. You colored it darker around the edges, but it's just a little thing I do. And I love how it makes it look a little bit more worn. And then at the end, I draw my arrow. Preferably use a ruler, and I go like push really hard and try and do it as straight. It's never perfect, just because when you're pushing hard on a colored pencil, you lose precision. For some reason, it just kind of wants to bend to the side and stuff. But that's like my go-to method. Now, you might say, well, not all notes are like a long paragraph. Some notes are just like a little word. Like Pastor Jim says this is like, I don't know, like when we worship celebrities. That sounds like something a pastor would say in the middle of a sermon, a random note on a random passage of the Bible. Now, as you can see, I wrote that technically a little bit in on the page. I could have pushed it farther to the edge, but I was writing really fast. Let's say I was in the middle of church and I just wrote it down really quickly. I wouldn't probably use the same method here because it's not quite a square. You could make it like a rectangle note, and because it's diagonal right here, you could go like that and make it look folded over. Did y'all see how I did that? So I drew the triangle first, and then that triangle is the fold over. I like to color the dark side, like the back side that's folded up. I like to color that dark, matching the edge, because to me that looks more realistic. And then I like to softly color it a little bit darker around the folds to make it look, again, slightly more realistic. But again, it's never perfect. And I'm kind of rushing, wanting to show you guys all the ideas I have in my brain or things that I do. So there's one way that you could do it. But if I wrote that note, honestly, just because it's a little bit different. So if I were to do something like that, I tend to want to make these kinds of notes because it's more of like a reflective note. It doesn't give me background information. It doesn't break down a word. It doesn't, anything like that. It's more of just like a reflective pastoral application. So I tend to want to do things like that, even titles, as more of a banner. And banners are fun. You can make them look folded under. You can also draw banners so that they fold. Oop, I'm messing up on camera. Like, let me just do it because apparently I have to really focus. Apparently I can't talk to you guys while I do it. But I like doing them like they fold, and then you can go like, this chapter means blah, blah. And then it's just kind of, I like to use banners for overarching statements, overarching broad summaries, applications. Banners just feel to me like the vibe that a banner brings in my Bible notes seems to be, a title or a generalization or a broad statement. They don't seem to be like, background info on a word. Now, I'm sure I've probably done that with a banner before, but I tend just naturally to use banners for more like, usually in my Bible, it will be like Psalm 39 and it will be a banner. Let's see. So another way I do that at like the top of the page, let's say this is the Bible page right here. And I'm afraid my notes will be confusing because there's multiple Psalms on the Bible page or whatever. Sometimes I'll draw a banner around the title. So I know, okay, all of these notes on this page are Psalm 39. And if you can see, I basically just start with a rectangle. Then I make another rectangle coming halfway down that has the little slits in it like a banner does. Then I draw a triangle off of that and connect them. That's the easiest way that I've figured out how to draw banners. And then, like always, like I've said, I color the fold, like the underside of the fold, darker than the front side, because to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, it just looks more like that's truly shadowed then. Another way that I like to do this is I will, have my note going, let's say it's I don't know. Let's say it's a word study or it's background information on the ancient Near East, whatever. And it's rectangle form, but I've done a lot of folded over corners. I've done all the other ones I've showed you, and I just want to mix it up some more. Sometimes I'll go for a curl. Let's say it's curling up from the bottom. So I'll draw the curl first, and it's going to come down like this, and it's going to have more of a rounded edge. And then like before, we're going to color this part lighter than the underside. I still like to draw a solid line around it, so it's clear like this note is a brown note, and then the arrow can be in this dark brown, but to each his own. Obviously, you do not have to do it exactly how I do it. And when it comes to my brown notes, I'll often do that because you can make it look so cool if you use like multiple different browns. There's like a middle tone between the two. You can just make it look real, like it's a pirate's note. I kind of love the Jim Holtz. Look. I feel like I have to make fun of myself for that, since clearly I know nothing about what his real name is. Now, when you have rectangle notes. You can also still do, just to make it look interesting, let's say this is filled with notes, you can still do like the fold under rip look or the fold under fold look. You can even do like out, you just go out halfway, cut over, and you make it look just like a banner, but still a note. Just give it interest. And then all the while, I still like to use my little tape method. I just think it's fun to add in tape, and it's super simple. I start with like a long line. I usually kind of do something like this. It's never perfect. It's never exactly realistic, but it is cohesive among all my notes. So most all my notes have some kind of faux tape on them just because I naturally tend to do that. So let's flip through a couple of my Bible notes, and I just want to walk you through what happened. Now, the Psalms are really easy because every single week I do an in-depth study through a Psalm with my patrons. And so every single week I'm kind of adapting or continuing my Bible notes strategy and finding new hacks and things. Here I tried something that I'm not sure I did very well, but I was trying to make it look like there was a wrinkle in the paper, that there was kind of like a wave wrinkle. And I feel like I didn't execute it as well as I could have, but it's a new practice, a new thing to try. You can see I did a lot of curling edges here and here on this day. And then for Psalm 34 right here, a lot of my notes, as you can see here, Psalm 34 went over to this page. So you see a lot of the arrows over here. And so that meant Psalm 35 was like written basically over with arrows. And so I knew ahead of time that I needed to reprint Psalm 35 on this page because most of Psalm 35 is on the next page anyway. And so each Psalm is going to be different, but you can see through each week, through, even using mixed media, like my stickers that go on, that I share with my Patreon, they all carry the same kind of theme because it just naturally works. And whenever I do not stick to the theme and I break pattern and I do like just a note that's kind of color coded here and here, it's just more confusing. It's just really hard to read. Usually I'm doing it because I don't have a ton of space and it just never works well. Oh, here I threw in a circle. That's fun. But here's another sticker from my Patreon page. I love this one. I think it's beautiful. But you guys can see some of these notes, and I really, truly, it's hard to tell which ones are old and versus new. Some of these were here all along before I started my Psalm series. Let's flip around to let's go to the Gospels. The Gospels are something that I'm always studying and referencing. And so there's so many notes from so many different eras in the Gospels. Okay, yeah. For example, this is a good page. So as you can see, there is bleed through because on the back side, really early on in my Bible journaling, I used a thing that bled. So some of these notes are from a long, long time ago. I know for sure this one is early on, one of my first Bible journaling notes. And then some of them, like this one, was from 2 months ago, I think. Same with this one, but they all blend together because they look layered, because they all kind of had that same theme and coloring style of doing it dark around the edges, coloring it lightly in, and making it look like a piece of paper layered. And I think that's the beauty of figuring out your style. Again, you don't have to go with my style, but I think there's value in kind of creating a set style. You guys can see here, we're in John. A lot of my John notes are green and blue, but up here, these are notes that I took very, very early on when I was getting into Bible journaling. They were actually from my seminary class. I wrote these in the midst of listening to the lecture. Then I came down here a month or two later when I was using the Bible Knowledge Commentary, and I wrote a quote from them and made it look like a banner. So big notes on the section. Then I came down here and here's a note on just these words right here. Here's a big, huge note. If I was to rewrite that, I would write that so much smaller because it just is taking up a lot of space. But they've all been written down in different eras and different, seasons of life, but they look cohesive because I just lean towards the same style. So I feel like at this point I'm beating a dead horse, but hopefully you guys get the idea. If I were to start over again, Bible journaling from fresh new Bible, from the fresh start, I would stick with this same theme. I would just make sure to write so much smaller than some of my first ones, like I showed you just now in John. That Lazarus note, I think it was on Lazarus, I would make it so much smaller because I was just writing really big. The tape was really big and thick, and you can still have beautiful elements, little flowers or tape or just any kind of extra prettiness that you add in without them being huge and taking up the whole page where you could otherwise put valuable notes. I also wish that I didn't stick with color themes as much because honestly, it's just not, you can't keep it up. Using a large host of colors and just sticking to a similar style is more sustainable for years to come. And then when I want to, I can throw in my gel highlighters or my normal Bible highlighters or stickers and stamps and all of that. But for the most part, to make a quick note while I'm, in-depth studying and not just trying to be creative, it's a style that I can easily do quickly that still looks cute, in my opinion. If you want to learn more about the mistakes I've made in the past and lessons I've learned and how I'm fixing them, or even just the growth and change of my Bible since I very first got it, check out this video right here. I know you'll enjoy it. And make sure you're subscribed because next week I'm going to be fixing a Bible page in my Bible, falling out, and it's time for me to fix them. I'll see you guys next week and in this video right here. Bye guys.